we have had major transitions in our church's history right at this time. Our church was born on a Saturday night, 2006. I believe it was April 8th or 9th. I'm pretty sure it was the 9th, but to look back. But 2006 is a Saturday night. And a little group of people were just hanging out in a home here in Egan, and that little group has grown into what this is here, but in the beginnings, we just had no idea, and we're just praying and seeking the Lord, and His presence was with us, and there's just a promise of something that just hung out in our hearts. We just knew God wanted to do something, and I was looking at the history books. I've been doing research. I can't remember if I shared this or not last week, but I was looking at the history books of revivals and what God's done in history, and April 9th, 1906, 100 years earlier, the very same day is when the Azusa Street revival kicked off. 100 years earlier. Something significant about this season for us as a church, but there's something significant in history in this season. When you pick up on little breadcrumbs like that, it's like, God, do it again. God, do it again. Mark this generation for transformation, for revival, for a move of God that changes everything. Does anybody want to be a part of that? The last couple of weeks I've been talking about the momentum that happens when generations work together. We're going to continue that conversation today. It's an absolute miracle. I've done literally 3 sermons in a row as a series. I cannot believe this has happened. It's a sign of the time. There must be glory on this because there's no way. I have never in the history of my whole, I have never been able to preach even 2 sermons in a row on the same topic. Here we are, it's week 3. It's a sign and a wonder, all right? So you're present for it. But we've been talking about how the role of the older generation is to hold up the testimony of what God's done in their lives. Like Moses lifted up the rod. The rod represented what God had done in history. The move of God in Moses' generation, it was all represented in that stick, the shepherd's rod. And Moses went up on the hillside, and standing on the testimony, he raised up his history in God so that Joshua, who was facing his own battle, whenever Joshua would look up on the hill, he would see the rod of God being lifted up, a previous generation holding up what God had done in the past, declaring, God's faithful. He'll be faithful for you. That when that rod was lifted up, Joshua prevailed in his modern battle and what Joshua was facing. Listen, the older generation, you've had encounters with God. Our process, what we're supposed to do is stand up, holding up, and reminding the next generation that God will do it for them too, until they get their own victory. Once they get their victory, then they have it. Moms, dads, you got kids that are wayward, this is your job. Keep reminding them that God is real till they get their own testimony. Holding up the rod, it's the older generation's job. We encourage and we speak the testimony as God's faithfulness as the youngers rise up. But it's not just on the older generation to make sure that the inheritance is passed on. The baton is passed from generation to generation. Nope, it's also the younger generation's job as well. We have to, as a younger generation, rise up and build a bridge to touch and honor those who have gone before us. We got to do it. I talked to you guys last week that literally the largest transfer of wealth in world history is happening in our day. It's estimated at $10 trillion will transfer from one generation to the next in the next 10 to 15 years. Okay, and that's quickening as there has been crises. That time is shortening. $10 trillion will pass from one generation to the next in value, in companies, in organizations that an older generation started and pioneered and brought forth value. And now they're ready to retire or step out, sell, or shut down. And that value will be lost unless the next generation rises up, builds a bridge of honor to walk in the same things that they walked in. Are you with me here? Younger generation, you got to rise up. You got to recognize what God's done and go after it with honor. And you serve You build that bridge. You value what others have stewarded. And when there's trust established, oh man, it's easy to bless and to give freely what God's put in my life. It's easy to give it away to somebody that I see and recognize is going for the same things that God put in my heart. Easy to get behind that. Are you with me this morning? This experience is the momentum that picks up from generation to generation to generation. God is a multiple generation God. He is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He starts a work in one generation and brings it to completion in another. He sees the end from the beginning. He intends a glorious result, and then he starts in the midst of something that doesn't look anything like that. He speaks a word, and it begins to reverberate through generations until it's fulfilled. This is our God. And you and I find ourselves in a moment of history where this is happening right in front of our eyes, and we're invited to participate. Now, I want to talk to you today about a very practical way, moms and dads, sons and daughters, to intentionally pass the baton of what God's done in your life to the next generation. It matters. It matters so significantly. I've had this story in my own life over and over and over. I wish I had hours today just because I could keep going. Literally, I probably have another 5 weeks of talking about this same subject. It's just so real for me. It's the history of our church and who we are, and I want you to get it so badly today. There's a momentum available for your life. You don't have to start from square one. There is a spiritual momentum, the blessing of 1,000 generations that can come upon your life and surge it forward. Like swimming in the ocean and all of a sudden a riptide, boom, you are off to the races. Your life does not have to take one step at a time, 2 steps forward, 1 back. You can grab hold of what God's doing and boom, so much can change in a moment. I want to look at 2 passages of Scripture. It's a bit of a life message for me this morning, and so again, I got 5 hours of material, and the worship team went long. I don't know what that's all about. There is a scripture in Malachi. It says Malachi chapter 4, verse 5 and 6. A lot of people know it. I want to look at it maybe with fresh eyes today. There's a principle that's hidden right in plain sight that once you see it, it'll transform your thinking. It says this, "Behold, I'm going to send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord. He will restore the hearts of fathers to their children and the hearts of children to their fathers, so that I will not come and smite the land with a curse." I'm going to read it one more time. "Behold, I'm going to send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord. He will restore the hearts of fathers to their children and the hearts of children to their fathers, so that I will not come and smite the land with a curse." Sometimes when I read the scriptures, I will take a passage that I can see there's a cause and effect to it, and instead of continuing trying to read it forward to understand, I'll just literally take it in reverse, and sometimes the truth will pop out at you. It's just a little tool, in this case, so we're going to go backwards to the front, okay? "So that I will not come and smite the land with a curse." Okay, so there are consequences that result when the hearts of children and the hearts of fathers are disconnected. Consequences happen when 2 generations are not walking together. When a father generation and a son generation, and I'm using these, they're gender terms, but it's usums. Usums, you get it? Good? All of us? It's all of us. When an older generation and a younger generation, fathers and mothers, sons and daughters, when they are not walking together, when they're not facing each other, when they're not working together, then there is a downfall. There's a curse that's resulted. There's consequences that take place. Because we've been talking about Israel so often recently, when you see the Israelites come out of slavery and God's bringing them towards the promised land, that generation that saw all those miracles, they were brought right to the edge of the promised land, and God wanted them to go in. He was trying to help them to enter into promise, fullness. But that generation turned their heart. That generation got fear. There's lots of reasons why you might turn your heart away from the previous generation. You get embittered against them. You get angry at them. They fell short of your expectations. You're disappointed in them. Maybe there was, a fallout. Maybe there's unforgiveness. Maybe there's bitterness that goes on. I don't know why you and your parents aren't talking anymore, but I can tell you that the result of it is catastrophic. It's not good. It's not insurmountable because God goes ahead and he just moves right around that generation to the next one. But I don't want that to happen to your kids. I don't want that to happen to you. I want you to walk in fullness and promise. And so this becomes vital. It's important. That generation that refused to enter in got disconnected, and it was their kids that ended up stepping into promise, and they died in the wilderness. Just take your finger, just go like this, make a fist, okay? You're not going to point it at anybody else. You're just going to point at yourself and go, that ain't going to happen to me. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. No. And so that's why you're going to listen to Pastor Jamey today. Go back to the first verse there. When the prophetic is released, it creates the opportunity for generations to turn towards themselves. And instead of curse, they reverse curses. Instead of consequences, there's healing. Okay, the atmosphere for generations to work together is a prophetic atmosphere. When the spirit of prophecy goes out, when we hear with our ears, when we hear the voice of the Lord, when we hear God's version of history, not CNN, Fox, or whoever your favorite, news channel is, not that version of modern, but look to see what God says about your circumstance. Look at your prophetic words. Look at what God said about the future, and stir that up. See, the prophetic is God saying over people, this is my intended version. This is where you're heading. You're meant for glory. Sin has caused you to fall short of that. And so when we prophesy, we're telling people about the sin, not the sin part of it, but the glory they're falling short of. We talk to people about the end. So prophecy is. And so in an atmosphere where prophecy comes, what's it do? It awakens older people, younger people to start to look at the future with hope. To look at each other, not with accusation. You are the one that screwed it up. No, you're the one that screwed it up. No, you're the one. Oh, look at you. Like, when we accuse each other of messing it all up, guess what happens? Nothing good. When we blame one another, nothing good. When one generation looks at the other and goes, hey, y'all messed the world up. Is that helpful? Nope. Why? Because the older generation got the money. You want them to work with you, younger generation? You want that resource to be able to fix the world? You might want to, stop blaming.